Therapists who do couples therapy, how often is it clearly one person in the relationship who is the problem? Welcome to the video. Make sure to subscribe and watch until the end. Enjoy watching. Story 1. Today, a couple came in after 20 years of marriage complaining about a midlife crisis. I dig deeper. It turns out that she found correspondence with women on dating sites on his phone. "This is not cheating, he shouts. "I didn't meet them. It was just interesting to talk to them." And she sits there crying, 20 years of loyalty, and he says it's just fun. I try to explain to him that emotional betrayal hurts just as much as physical betrayal, but he looks at me like I'm an alien from Mars. Some people can justify anything to avoid feeling guilty. Story 2. An interesting case. A woman complains that her husband is emotionally cold and doesn't say anything. I invite him for an individual conversation, and it turns out that he spent his childhood with his mother, who turned his every word into a cause for scandal. "Why say something if it will be wrong anyway?" he asks. And his wife sincerely doesn't understand why he closes down when she just wants to help with her advice. Two worlds, two logics, and no one wants to take a step forward. The sad thing is that they really love each other. They just speak different languages of emotions. Story 3. An interesting case. A couple comes to me who have been living together for 15 years but are not officially married. The problem is not in the relationship but in his mother, who calls every day with advice on how her son should live. "She even knows what we had for lunch," the girl is indignant. The husband justifies the mother. "She's just worried." A classic struggle between maternal love and adult relationships. The mother can't let go of her son, he can't set boundaries, and the partner is in the role of a rival. We are working on teaching him to say no to his mother without feeling guilty. The most difficult thing is to convince him that his mother's love should not destroy his personal life. 6 months later, he finally finds the courage to set the rules. His mother calls once a week at a scheduled time, not whenever she wants. Surprisingly, his mother takes it easier than expected. It turns out that she too was tired of being an over-controlling mother. She just didn't know how to get out of this cycle. Story 4. The client brags, "I am very romantic. I always give my wife a compliment before we have sex." I ask what kind of compliment. I tell her that she doesn't look as bad today as she did yesterday. My wife is shocked. "It's not a compliment, it's a comparative characterization." He sincerely does not understand. But I said it's better today. Story 5. Wednesday afternoon. I have a couple with an introverted programmer and an extroverted teacher. The conflict is classic. He needs silence after work, she needs communication and emotions. "He comes home like a robot," she complains. "She doesn't let me rest for a minute." He is indignant. I start with a simple experiment. I ask them to live on a schedule for a week. The first hour after work is his time of silence, and the second is her time of talking. At first they resist. "It's artificial," but after a month they come back with wonder in their eyes. "When I know I'll have my hour, it's easier to give it to him," she says. "And when I'm rested, I really want to listen to her," he adds. The simplest solutions are often the most effective. People think that love should be spontaneous, but sometimes it needs planning and structure. The main thing is that both parties are ready to compromise. Story 6. In the middle of a session, a man suddenly stands up and says, "I'm not going to listen to this." His wife told him about his outbursts of anger, and he couldn't take it anymore. "She's exaggerating," he shouts, leaving the office. We are alone together, and she confesses he never listens to the end. As soon as he hears something unpleasant, he runs away. This is a classic case of emotional immaturity. The inability to accept criticism turns a dialogue into a monologue. A week later, he returns with flowers and apologies, but the pattern repeats itself again and again. Some people choose to remain children even in an adult body. Story 7. Yesterday, a client said, "My wife accuses me of not being a romantic." I ask him what he does for romance. "Well, I take out the trash without being reminded." And she said, "That's not romance, that's basic hygiene." He was sincerely surprised. Then what is romance? I had to explain the difference between not being a pig and giving pleasant emotions. Story 8. Recently, I've noticed a trend. Young couples come with problems that used to be typical of middle age. 20-somethings complain about lack of passion, indifference, and routine. We've been together for only 3 years, and we already feel like an old couple, the girl laments. It turns out that they live like roommates. He plays games, she watches TV shows, and they only eat and sleep together. No common dreams, no plans, not even a conversation. What is there to talk about? The guy is sincerely surprised. It's clear. We work, we rest, everything is fine. I try to explain relationships are not about coexistence. They are a constant process of getting to know each other. People change, grow, and if you don't keep up with these changes, you become a stranger to the person closest to you. The worst thing is that many young people confuse comfort with happiness. They think that if there are no conflicts, then everything is fine. But the absence of conflicts can also mean the absence of depth. Story 9. The phone rings. The number is unfamiliar. Doctor, you don't remember me, but 3 years ago you consulted my husband and me. I try to remember, but I don't recognize the voice. Back then, we were on the verge of divorce. You told us something important. Stop trying to change each other and start changing yourself. Now I remember. A young couple, both stubborn as goats. Each demanded that the other partner become different. I want to tell you, we did not divorce. Moreover, we had a son. He explains how they stopped fighting and started working on themselves. He learned to talk about his feelings, and she learned to listen without immediate advice. It turned out that we love not ideal versions of each other, but the real ones, with all the flaws and oddities. I hang up the phone with a smile. These are the kind of calls that make it worth working as a psychologist, when people find the strength to stop the war and start building peace. Story 10. A couple complains. We can't agree on the housekeeping. It turns out that he leaves the dirty dishes behind, explaining that he soaks them for better washing. She. Soaking for 3 days? An ecosystem has already formed there. He was offended. I'm trying my best. I said, man, your soaking is just a nice word for laziness. Story 11. In the morning, an acquaintance calls. Can you recommend a good family psychologist? It turns out that her husband needs therapy after he found her correspondence with a lover. But I confessed, she justifies herself. I want to save my family. I recommend my colleague, but I wonder if she is really ready to change or just wants to cover her tracks. Cheating is not a mistake, it's a choice. And until a person recognizes this difference, no amount of therapy will help. Trust is broken in minutes and rebuilt over years. Story 12, Wednesday, a strange session. A couple came with a complaint I had never heard before. We are too happy and it scares us. They are both young, beautiful, successful, and madly in love with each other. My friends say it's not normal, the girl explains. We've been together for 1.5 years, and we're still like teenagers, holding hands, kissing in public, can't get enough of each other. The guy adds, my colleagues joke that soon the honeymoon will be over and real life will begin, but I don't want it to end. It turns out that their environment systematically sets them up for the fact that such love cannot last. All my married friends talk about problems, compromises, and partner fatigue, she says. And we start thinking, what's wrong with us? The strangest thing is that they came to the psychologist not because of problems, but because of the fear that there should be problems. Maybe we are missing something. Maybe we should fight more. I sit and wonder, society is so used to toxic relationships that healthy ones seem suspicious. Your happiness is not a disease, I tell them. Not all couples are doomed to suffer. Some are truly made for each other. I assign them the strangest homework in my practice. Keep being happy and stop apologizing for it. 6 months later, they call. They got engaged. We decided not to wait until the happiness passed. They laugh. Story 13. I end the day with an entry in my diary. Today I realized that my job is not to save relationships. My job is to help people be honest with themselves. Half of the couples come with the illusion that a therapist is a magic wand that will bring back their lost love. In reality, I'm just holding a mirror in which they can see the real themselves. Some people are afraid of this reflection and run away. Some accept it and start to change, and some continue to blame the mirror for showing them the wrong way. Story 14. A folder with a new case. A wife found her husband's diagnosis of bipolar disorder, which he had been hiding for 3 years of marriage. "How can I trust him after such a lie?" she cries. He is silent, his head down. "I was afraid you would leave," he finally admits. This is an example where the problem is not with one person, but with the fear of rejection. Mental illness is not a choice, but hiding it destroys relationships faster than the disease itself. We work for months teaching them to live with this reality. Sometimes love really does conquer all, if both parties are willing to fight. Story 15. Friday, the end of the working week. The last couple of the day. They've been coming for 4 months, and the progress is obvious. They used to be unable to spend an hour together without quarreling, and now they are planning a vacation. The secret is simple. They learned to talk about feelings, not actions. Instead of "you never help me," I started saying, "I feel lonely when I do everything myself." Instead of "you're always criticizing me," I started saying, "it hurts when it seems like I'm not doing anything right." The same problems, but a different language of expression. And suddenly they heard each other. She realized that he was not lazy, but tired and insecure. He realized that she was not evil, but overwhelmed and in need of support. Today they talk about how they cooked dinner together yesterday and laughed at their own mistakes. "It turns out that even doing the dishes together can be fun," she says. "The main thing is to do it as a team, not as competitors," he adds. I look at them and think, this is true happiness. Not a perfect relationship, but a relationship where people are willing to work on themselves for the sake of a common future. Story 16. I look at another couple. She's sobbing, telling me about his trips to strip clubs, and he is shouting indignantly, "This is not cheating, I'm just watching." I try to explain that cheating does not begin with physical contact, but with concealment and lies. "But all men do that," he justifies himself. "Not mine," she says quietly. And in that silence, you can hear the trust being broken. Some things cannot be taken back or explained. You can only admit the mistake and begin to rebuild what you have destroyed. But this requires courage, which he does not seem to have. Story 17. Today, a teenager is brought in and his parents complain about his disobedience. After half an hour of conversation, it becomes clear the child is just trying to protect himself from his toxic parents. The mother is constantly humiliating, the father is indifferent, and the child is considered the problem. "We love him," the mother insists. "That's why we set the rules." I try to explain the difference between love and control, but I see a blank wall in their eyes. They don't want to change, they want a fixed son who will obediently fulfill their whims. The worst thing is to realize that in 10 years, this guy will bring his wife here. Story 18. I hang up the phone after another call from the divorced father. The therapist is biased against me, the third therapist in 6 months. The pattern is always the same. A couple comes in, one of the partners tries to bribe me with their version of events, and when I don't take sides, I become biased. The most striking case is a man who changed 5 therapists in one session because everyone did not understand his pain. The pain was the unwillingness to recognize that violence is unacceptable. When a person is looking for a therapist who will confirm his or her rightness instead of helping, it is no longer therapy, but a search for an ally in the war against the partner. Story 19. The changeable weather outside the window resembles the moods of my clients. The secretary calls. "A man is here to see you. He says his wife died 6 months ago, but he still talks to her." We make an appointment for Friday. A short gray man comes in with eyes full of pain. "People say I've gone crazy," he begins. But Marussia answers me. How can I stop talking to her? He says that they have lived together for 43 years and have never been apart for a single day. She knew what I would think before I did. and I could feel her mood from a kilometer away. After her death from cancer, he continues to live according to their usual schedule, making coffee for two, telling her the news from the TV, consulting her before making important decisions. My children want to take me to a psychiatrist. They say it's unhealthy. But I think something else is unhealthy when people expect a 43-year love to disappear in a few months. Your wife is really with you, I tell him. Only now she lives in your memories and heart, and that's wonderful. He cries with relief. Finally, someone doesn't think he's crazy. Story 20. Thursday, a non-standard session. A man in his 60s comes to me with a young woman. The age difference is 25 years. People around me say that she is with me because of money, he complains. The girl is silent, but I can read the resentment in her eyes. I begin to ask her cautiously about their relationship. It turns out to be a real love story that started at work. She is his assistant, smart, ambitious, with her own goals. He is a widower, lonely after 30 years of marriage. It wasn't his status that struck me, but the way he talks to people, she finally says. He never raises his voice, always asks my opinion, and respects my decisions. And he adds, she gave me back my will to live. After my wife died, I thought everything was over. The problem is not their relationship, but the judgment of others. His late wife's relatives do not accept his new lover, and her friends do not understand his choice. Everyone is waiting for us to get a divorce, he says sadly. We work to teach them to ignore other people's opinions and build relationships based on their own feelings. At the end of the session, she says, this is the first time someone hasn't asked me how much he pays me for love. He smiles. And they didn't ask me if I'm not ashamed to be fooling around at this age. Sometimes true love comes in the most unexpected forms. Story 21. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. My assistant looks in. You have an unscheduled client. He says it's urgent. A woman in her 40s wearing a tracksuit obviously came running in from the street. I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who to turn to. She tells us a strange story. She has been with her husband for 20 years, but recently she has begun to suspect him of cheating, not because she found evidence, but because he became too perfect. He used to forget my birthday, but now he gives me flowers for no reason. He used to ignore my new hairstyle, but now he praises every little thing. She admits that this scares her more than any evidence of infidelity. A living man does not suddenly become perfect. Either he is in love or he is guilty of something terrible. The strangest thing is that she doesn't want to know the truth. If he cheats but tries to be a better man, maybe this is the solution. Here's the paradox. Sometimes people are not afraid of betrayal, but of changing the usual rules of the game. Story 22, Thursday, the last session of the day. A woman in her 50s comes in alone. My husband refused to come, she explains. She tells the story of a 30-year marriage that has turned into a coexistence of two strangers. They don't quarrel, they don't yell at each other, they just live in parallel worlds. He watches TV, she reads. He eats in the kitchen, she eats in the room. They even go to bed at different times. When did it start? I ask. She thinks for a long time. I think after the birth of my eldest son, I was completely immersed in motherhood, he in work, and when the children grew up, it turned out that we were strangers. The most tragic thing is that they are not hostile to each other. They are just indifferent. Emotional death hurts more than hatred because there is no cure for indifference. I try to help her find the strength to either return the relationship or end it with dignity. The choice is always up to the person. I can only show possible ways. Story 23. A young mother comes without her husband, holding her child in her arms. The baby is sleeping and she is talking through tears. He says, I'm a bad mother, I'm ruining his life. It turns out that everything changed after the birth of their daughter. They used to be a couple in love, now they are tired parents. She feeds the baby at night, he complains about lack of sleep. She worries about every cry of the baby, he gets irritated because of the constant anxiety. We don't love each other anymore, we just survive, she says. And the worst part is that they blame the baby. We were happy before, she repeats. I try to explain that a child does not destroy a relationship. It just shows how strong it was. If a couple is based only on romance and passion, motherhood becomes a test that they cannot withstand. Real relationships go through crises and become stronger. But to do this, you need to stop blaming the child for your own immaturity. Story 24. The wife complains, "He never helps with the cooking." The husband is outraged. "What do you mean I don't help? I always say whether it's tasty or not." She, "That's not helping, that's reviewing." He, "But it's constructive. Last time you said the soup needed more salt." I said, "Criticism without participation is not a partnership, it's a restaurant inspection." Story 25. The phone rings at 9 in the evening. "Doctor, it's urgent. My husband says he will go to his mistress if I don't become a better wife." I talk to her for an hour, calm her down, and schedule a session. The next day, he comes alone. My wife is crazy, making up some problems. A classic situation. One partner is desperate, the other pretends that nothing is happening. A month later, she comes for individual therapy. He said it was my fault that the therapy didn't work. When a person is not ready to recognize reality, no amount of therapy in the world can save a relationship. Story 26. The couple was fighting about who should do the dishes. He said, "I work, I earn money." She, "And what about me? Am I resting in the country? I'm working too." Him, "But my salary is higher." She got up and left. She came back with a calculator. "You will pay for the housework at the hourly rate of a cleaner. The first bill is $50,000 for the month." Story 27. It was a strange session. The couple came for a preventive visit and their relationship seemed to be perfect. But in the course of the conversation, it turns out that they simply avoid any conflicts. "We never fight," the wife is proud. "Why spoil the atmosphere?" The husband plays along. But in their eyes, I see fatigue from the constant pretense. A relationship without conflict is not harmony, it is emotional death. Conflict is a natural part of intimacy, a way to solve problems. When people are afraid to fight, they stop being real with each other. Story 28. Recently, I've noticed an interesting trend. Couples come not to save their relationship, but to get official confirmation that divorce is inevitable. "Tell him I tried," the wife pleads. "Explain to her that I did my best," demands the husband. They want me to become their alibi in front of their children, relatives, and conscience. The saddest thing is that more often than not, these relationships could really have been saved if they had come 5 years earlier, but pride is worth more than love. Story 29. A man calls, his voice trembling. "My wife says she will leave me if I don't change." I ask him more about it, and it turns out that change means quitting his job, friends, hobbies, and becoming the man she wants him to be. "And what is she willing to change?" I ask. She pauses. "Nothing. She says the problem is me." This is a classic case of one partner demanding total surrender under the slogan of saving the relationship. Such ultimatums rarely end happily. Either the person breaks down and becomes a shadow of himself, or she pulls herself together and leaves. Story 30. Saturday, an extreme session. A teenager is brought in with his parents. The boy is 15, but he looks like he's in his 20s. Tattoos, piercings, an aggressive look. "He disobeys me, is rude, may not come home at night," the mother complains. The father is silent, only occasionally throwing hateful glances at his son. I start talking to the teenager. The first half hour is full of aggression and indignation. But gradually the wall comes down. It turns out that the parents divorced 3 years ago, and since then the boy has become a bargaining chip in their war. His mother uses him to get to his father. "Tell Dad we need money for school." The father conveys insults to the mother through his son. "Tell Mom that she is a bad housewife." The child is tired of being a carrier pigeon between two adults who cannot behave in a civilized manner. "They think I don't understand, but I see everything," he says. "Dad hates Mom, Mom hates Dad, and I have to love them both." I explain to the parents a simple truth. Once they divorce as spouses, they remain parents forever. Their war cripples the child more than the breakup itself. The father finally looks at his son with a human eye. "I didn't know it was so hard for you." The mother cries, "I'm sorry, we acted like children." The next time all three of them came, but with a different energy, they started to communicate, not fight. Story 31. Today I received a letter that revolutionized my understanding of the profession. It was from a woman I had counseled 5 years ago. "Doctor, do you remember our couple? We came then because of his gambling addiction." I remember a young man who lost his apartment, car, and even his wife's wedding ring in a casino. She was pregnant at the time, crying and begging him to stop. "I want to tell you how our life turned out," the letter continues. "We divorced 6 months after your sessions. He couldn't quit the game, and I couldn't take it anymore." I read on with a heavy heart. Another failure in my practice. But suddenly the tone of the letter changes. "It was the best decision of my life. My son grew up without a gambling father. I found a job, finished my courses, and met a wonderful man. 3 years later, my ex-husband turned to drug treatment. Now he hasn't gambled for 2 years. He works and even pays alimony regularly. We have become good parents for our son, each in our own life." It turns out that divorce is not always a defeat. Sometimes it is the only way to save children from a toxic environment and give adults a chance to change. Thank you for not trying to save us at all costs. You helped me see that some relationships are worth letting go of. I sit with the letter in my hands and cry. Not from sadness, but from realization. My job is not always to save families. Sometimes it's about helping people find the courage to start a new life. Story 32. It's Sunday, a free day, but the work of a psychologist never ends. I walk through the park and watch couples. Here are young parents. She is pushing a stroller. He is walking next to the phone. The child is crying and he doesn't even look up. Here's an elderly couple on a bench sitting in silence, looking in different directions, 40 years together, and they have nothing to say to each other. Here are teenagers holding hands. They have fire in their eyes, but in a year, this fire can turn to ash. I look at this and think, why is it so difficult to preserve something that seemed eternal at first? Perhaps because people expect love to live on its own, like a flower that was planted and forgotten to be watered. And then they wonder why it wilted. Love is not a feeling, it is a daily choice. The choice to see a partner as a person, not a function. The choice to listen, not just wait for your turn to speak. The choice to work on the relationship even when you are tired. Story 33. I remember a case with a couple where the wife constantly interrupted her husband and then complained that he doesn't tell me anything. When I pointed this out, she exploded. "You're the one who's prejudiced against women." The man smiled quietly. For the first time in months, someone saw his problem. Sometimes it's enough just to call a spade for people to see the light. But more often they choose to remain blind because the truth is too painful to perceive. At such moments, I realize that I am not a magician. I am just a mirror that shows what is. Story 34. The husband is indignant. "My wife wants to talk about feelings all the time." I ask how often. "Almost every day." "And what does she want to talk about?" "How the day went, what's bothering me, about plans." I look at him. This is called normal communication, not talking about feelings. You are confusing your wife with a therapist. Story 35. The husband said, "I don't understand what she wants. I buy her gifts." I ask what kind of gifts. "Well, a slow cooker for her birthday, an iron for March 8th, wife. And for our wedding anniversary, I gave her a vacuum cleaner." He, "A good vacuum cleaner. It's expensive." I said, "Are you confusing your wife with household appliances or are you deliberately provoking her?" Story 36. I open the folder with the new couple. He says that his wife is completely crazy. She calls him a complete idiot. The first session is always like an archaeological dig. You dig, and then suddenly you find the shard that explains everything. This time, the shard was a phrase, "We never discussed what our life would look like on one salary." Boom. There it was, the root of the problem. He was expecting a 1950s-style wife, cooking, cleaning, looking after the children. She thought she would be an equal partner who just temporarily doesn't work. Both are right, both are wrong, both are not to blame for not being able to read minds. Story 37. I end the day with a phone call from a former client. Doctor, we broke up, but I want to thank you. You helped me realize that not all relationships are worth saving. A year ago, she came with her tyrant husband, hoping to fix him. Months of therapy showed that he did not want to change, and she had the right to be happy. Sometimes the best help is to let go of something that has long since died. Divorce can be not a defeat, but a liberation. The main thing is to learn to distinguish between when it is worth fighting and when it is worth running away. Story 38. The client is crying. He says I'm a bad cook. I asked the man what exactly he said. Well, that my mom's food was better. I am silent for 5 seconds. And how long do you want to sleep on the couch? He was surprised. What did I say wrong? My wife. You're comparing me to my late mother-in-law. I said, this is a classic of the genre, the fastest way to become an ex-husband. Story 39. The rain is drumming on the windows and I'm rereading the notes from the last session. Something stuck with me in a conversation with a couple who have been living in a civil marriage for 12 years. No children, no formalization, no joint property, seemingly perfect freedom. But yesterday she came to me alone and told me the real reason for their appeal. I'm sick, she said simply. I have cancer, maybe 6 months left. It turns out that the diagnosis was made a month ago and they still can't discuss it normally. He began to withdraw, not physically, but emotionally. He's probably preparing for me to leave, she says without any emotion. I understand him. Why suffer once again? But I see a terrible pain in her eyes. 12 years together, and now when we need real intimacy, he hides behind a wall of indifference. Maybe he just doesn't know how to behave, I speculate. Men often run away from things they can't control. She nods. I know, but I want him to be stronger than I expect at least once in my life. The next week they come in together. He is pale but holds her hand. I was afraid, he admits. I thought I'd better start getting used to being alone now. But yesterday I realized that if I have 6 months left, I want to live them with you, not prepare for your absence. They finally applied to the registry office. We want to be husband and wife for at least a few months, they explain. Sometimes death does not destroy a relationship, but shows its true value. Story 40. In the evening, I go through the day's recordings and think, how many of these couples really want to change, and how many are just playing theater? The morning starts with a call. We changed our minds about coming because my husband says that therapists always take the side of women, a classic of the genre. An hour later, she calls, Can I come alone? I just don't know what to do. That's how individual sessions are born, when one partner is ready to work and the other thinks the problem is a fiction. The most frustrating thing is that it is often the one who refuses therapy who needs it the most. Story 41. I'm sitting in the office looking at the couple in front of me. He leaned over to me, she crossed her arms and looked at the wall. Doctor, tell her she's wrong, he exclaims. She finally turns around. Am I the only one who's crazy here? 20 years of working as a family therapist have taught me one thing. When someone comes to me with the phrase, fix my partner, it's like coming to a mechanic and asking him to fix the road. The problem is usually in the interaction between two people who simply combine toxically, like chlorine and ammonia, separately wonderful substances. Together they are poison. Story 42. Story 43. It's Saturday, a working day. Not everyone understands why psychologists work on weekends, but for many couples, this is the only time they can come together. A middle-aged couple sits down with me. She is elegant, well-groomed. He wears a tailored shirt, an expensive watch. At first glance, it looks like a perfect family, but after 5 minutes, it becomes clear it's a scenery without content. She tells us how he travels on business trips and spends more and more time at work. You don't even notice when I do a new hairstyle or buy a dress, she says with pain in her voice. He looks up in surprise. But I provide you with everything you need. You have money for salons, shopping, what else do you need? This is a classic example of a man confusing provision with love. He sincerely doesn't understand why his wife is unhappy. After all, she has everything material. And she feels like a beautiful decoration in his life, not his beloved woman. When was the last time you talked about something other than household matters? I ask. They look at each other and are silent. What is there to talk about? We have everything, he grumbles. That's exactly the problem, I say quietly. For the next month, we work on teaching them to see each other not as roommates, but as partners. It turns out that under the mask of a successful businessman, there is a tired man who is afraid to stop and think about the meaning of his life. And under the elegance of a housewife, there is a woman who has long forgotten her dreams and desires. Story 44. I receive a note from my secretary. A client asked to see me urgently. He says he has done something terrible. We make an appointment for Saturday. A man of about 50 comes in, his hands shaking, his eyes red. I cheated on my wife, he says immediately, but not in the way you think. He tells a strange story. He and his wife have been together for 25 years, the last 5 without sex because of her chronic illness. I did not insist. I realized that she was in pain, he explains. But the need didn't go away. 6 months ago, he started visiting a massage parlor. Not for sex, he hastens to explain. I just wanted someone to touch me like a human being. But gradually, the massage turned into something more. I didn't have sex with her, he says, but I was lying there naked and she was touching me, and I imagined that it was my wife, like when I was young. He admits that yesterday his wife accidentally found the receipts from the salon. She cried and said that I would have been better off going to a prostitute. At least it would have been honest. Worst of all, he can't explain the difference between infidelity and a desperate need for human touch. I wasn't looking for love or adventure, he repeats. I just wanted to feel like a man, not a nurse. We work for months to teach them to talk about intimacy not as a duty but as a need. She gradually realizes that his visits to the salon were not a betrayal, but a cry for help, and he is learning to ask for support with words, not to look for it on the side. Story 45. At the end of the day, I always ask myself, how many couples have I really helped, and how many have I just given the opportunity to say we tried? The statistics are brutal. Success in 2 out of 5 cases. The rest either get divorced or continue to live in mutual hatred. But those 2 couples who manage to find each other again are worth all the effort. Because when you see people turn from enemies into allies, you realize that love can really conquer everything, it just doesn't always want to. Story 46. Friday night, late session. I usually avoid appointments after 7, but this couple couldn't make it at any other time. They both work night shifts. He is a security guard, she is an intensive care nurse. They met at the hospital when he brought in the wounded after an accident. We only see each other in the morning when we both come home from work, she says. And that's not always the case. Sometimes I have an extended shift, sometimes he does. The problem is not the work, but the fact that their communication takes place only when they are tired and stressed. I come home from the intensive care unit where people are dying and he talks about drunken hooligans, she complains. We never talk about anything good. He nods. It seems we can only talk about work, and our work is hard. Gradually, it becomes clear that they have forgotten who they are outside of their profession. She is not only a nurse, but also a dreamer who paints watercolors. He is not only a security guard, but also an amateur poet who writes poetry about nature. When was the last time you showed each other your art? I ask. They think for a long time. We don't remember, they admit. It turns out that hard work has eaten away at their personalities. Only functions remained, saving people, protecting objects. Their homework is simple. Once a week, they show each other their paintings and poems. But we're not professionals. They are shy. That's why it's valuable, I answer. You share your soul, not your skills. A month later, they come back with smiles. It turned out that we are not only colleagues in misfortune, she says. We are also creative people who can inspire each other. Story 47. I go to the gym after work and see a couple I know. They've been working out together for a month now. They come in, do their exercises on their own, and leave in silence. They don't even talk in the gym. I remember their story. They met through a dating app, got married 6 months later, and now they don't know what to talk about. We are perfect for each other on paper, she said at the reception. We have the same interests, similar views, the same education. But it turned out that similarity on paper does not guarantee closeness in real life. They are like two parallel trains, moving in the same direction but never intersecting. He has thoughts, she has feelings, but they don't share them. They live as roommates, not as lovers. Maybe we just need more time? She asked. And I thought, time does not create intimacy. It is created by the courage to be vulnerable to each other. Story 48. I sit across from a couple of pensioners who have been together for 50 years, but the hostility between them is physically palpable. We came because our daughter told us to, he grumbles. But what's the point? He will never change. She nods. And neither will I. I realize this is not therapy, it's a ritual. My daughter wants to calm her conscience. I did my best. And they play the role of dutiful parents. The most tragic thing is that in 50 years they have not learned to hear each other. Now it's too late. Instead of love, only habits and mutual resentment remain. Story 49. Monday brought a surprise. A woman made an appointment with me, but she came with two men. This is my husband, she pointed to one. And this is my boyfriend, she nodded to the other. I was embarrassed, but they looked quite serious. We want to live together, she explained, but we don't know how to organize it. It turned out that her marriage had cooled off after the birth of her children, but they remained good friends and parents. We haven't made love for 3 years, her husband admitted, but I love her as a person and want to raise our children together. And a year ago, she fell in love with a work colleague. At first I hid it, but then I told my husband I thought he would demand a divorce. But the unexpected happened. Her husband offered to meet her lover. It turned out he was a good man. The children loved him. Why not give it a try? Says her husband. The strangest thing was that all three of them looked happy. She got both family stability and the passion of love. The husband got rid of the guilt of being cold to his wife. The boyfriend found the ready-made family he always wanted. People say it's not normal, she says. But is it normal to live in an unhappy marriage? Or to destroy a family for love? I have been working with them for 6 months, trying to understand this unusual dynamic. The most important thing is that the children are comfortable. They do not feel tension between their parents. They see an example of honesty and respect. Perhaps the future of family relationships is more diverse than we think. Story 50. The phone rings at 8:30 in the evening. Rarely does anyone bother so late. Doctor, after your advice, we started telling the truth to each other, and now I don't know if I want to stay with my husband. I remember this couple. A month ago, I gave them homework. 15 minutes of honest conversation every day without accusations. It turned out that when they stopped playing roles and said what they really wanted from life, it became clear that their dreams were fundamentally different. He dreams of the quiet of a country house and gardening. She dreams of traveling and meeting new people. For 20 years, they have been adjusting to each other, but they are not really compatible. It's normal to feel disappointed, I tell her. It's better to find out the truth now than to live in an illusion for another 20 years. Sometimes honesty hurts more than deception, but it's the only way to have a chance at true happiness. Story 51. It's 7 in the evening, the last reception. I'm expecting a couple, but only the wife comes in. My husband is away on a business trip, she explains, but I can see that her hands are shaking and she has bruises under her eyes. We agreed to tell the truth, I gently remind her. She is silent for a long time, then exhales. He's not on a business trip, he's in jail. It turns out that her husband was imprisoned a month ago for an economic crime. The family found out by accident. He said he was going on a long business trip to Germany. For 3 weeks, I sent him text messages about how my day was going. She laughs through her tears. and he answered me from the prison phone. The worst part was not the crime itself, but the fact that he continued to lie even from behind bars. He was afraid of her reaction, ashamed, hoping to somehow cover his tracks after his release. "How do you live with a person who can hide something like that?" she asks. And I think, how do you live with a person who is afraid to confide in you even in the darkest moment of your life? Lying about the prison is a symptom. The disease is the complete lack of trust between the spouses. Story 52. I close the folder with the last couple of the day. He is an alcoholic who has been promising to stop drinking for 5 years. She is a codependent who believes his promises. "Maybe this time?" she asks, with hope in her eyes. It's not the first time I've seen this play. I know the ending by heart. But who am I to take away people's illusions? Sometimes they are the only thing that keeps us afloat. My job is not to break dreams, but to help people see reality. And what they do with it is their choice. Story 53. A man comes in alone without his wife. "She refused to come after you asked uncomfortable questions last time." I remember that session. I simply asked why she controls all his finances and forbade him to communicate with his friends. "This is care." She was indignant at the time. When I called it control, the atmosphere in the office became icy. The next day he called, "She says you don't understand women's psychology." It would be funny if it weren't so sad, when the truth becomes a misunderstanding of psychology. Story 54. Wednesday, emergency situation. A young girl is literally dragged into my office, followed by a guy with red eyes. "She wants to break off the engagement," he shouts. The girl is silent, trembling, but I can read determination in her eyes. Gradually, a terrible story emerges. 3 months ago, they got engaged and started planning the wedding. And suddenly, his behavior changed dramatically. He began to control her every move, forbade her to communicate with her friends, and demanded to report on every minute. "This is normal. I'm her future husband," he was indignant. "I have the right to know where my wife is." I look at the girl. She is so scared that she can't even speak normally. "He says that if I really love him, I have to prove it with complete obedience," she whispers. "And when I disagree, he cries and says I don't love him." It's a classic example of emotional abuse in the guise of love. I explain to her that true love does not require proof in the form of self-destruction. And I try to explain to him the difference between care and control. But he doesn't listen. In his mind, a woman should be a man's property. The girl makes the hardest decision of her life. She breaks off the engagement. He threatens her with suicide, but she holds on. A month later, he calls her Mazetti. "Thank you for helping me see the truth." It turns out he's already done this to 2 previous girls. It's scary to think how many women suffer from such love. Story 55. The office is filled with a strange smell of expensive perfume. A couple walks in, both dressed to impress, but keeping the maximum distance from each other. She owns a chain of beauty salons. He is a successful lawyer. "We haven't had sex for 2 years," she begins without preamble. He blushes but remains silent. He says he's tired at work. I think he just fell out of love. I ask about the details of their lives. It turns out to be a terrible picture. They work 14 hours a day, meet only for breakfast and before bed. Even in bed, everyone looks at their phones. "When was the last time you talked about something other than work?" I ask. They think for a long time. "I don't remember," he admits. Sex has disappeared not because love has disappeared. It disappeared because they disappeared. They turned into functions, earning money, running a house, paying bills, buying groceries. Where is the place for a person in this list? "Do you know what your husband dreams about?" I ask her. "Isn't it about money?" She replies, surprised. "And he dreams of giving up everything and going to live in the countryside." She learns this for the first time in 10 years of marriage. Story 56. Today a man came in without his wife. She says she doesn't love me and wants a divorce. I ask him about their life. He works 12 hours a day, spends his weekends with friends, and only thinks about his wife when he has to do laundry or cook. "But I provide for the family." He is indignant. I try to explain that money is no substitute for attention and providing for the family is not love. Then what else does she need? He is sincerely surprised. Some men live in a strange illusion. If their wife is dressed and fed, she must automatically be happy. Story 57. For the first time in my career, I couldn't stand it and told the client the truth to his face. Your problems are your problems, not your wife's fault. He was so surprised that I started speaking Chinese. How do you mean mine? She's the one who's always criticizing. After 2 months of working with him, he finally realized that when you yell at a person every day, they stop wanting to communicate with you. A brilliant discovery, isn't it? The most difficult thing in my job is to convince people that relationships are not a competition where there is a winner and a loser. It's a dance where both partners have to move to the rhythm, otherwise both will fall. Story 58. Monday brings an unexpected call. Doctor, I want to come to the session alone, without my husband. I recognize the voice. It's the woman who came with her alcoholic husband 6 months ago. Back then, he promised to get treatment, and she promised to support him. We meet in 2 days. She looks different, straightened, confident, with determination in her eyes instead of despair. I realize that I cannot save a person who does not want to be saved, she says calmly. She recounts how in recent months she tried to control his drinking, hiding alcohol, arguing, begging, and he continued to drink, only became better at hiding it. Last week he came home drunk and started yelling at his daughter. She cried and said, "Mom, why don't you protect me from Dad?" And I realized that I had become an accomplice to his illness. She tells how last night she calmly told her husband, "Either you go for treatment tomorrow or my daughter and I are going to her mother." He didn't believe her, but in the morning she really packed her things. For the first time in years, I put my child before his feelings, she says, smiling through her tears. She calls a week later. He made an appointment with a psychiatrist. I don't know if it will help, but at least I'm no longer a victim of circumstances. Sometimes the greatest act of love is the willingness to let someone go so that they can finally face the consequences of their actions. Story 59. Today I witnessed a real breakthrough moment. A couple who had been fighting for 6 months before my eyes suddenly stopped in the middle of another argument. She was accusing him of not helping with the housework, and he was indignant that she didn't appreciate his efforts at work. And suddenly he said, "Stop, I just realized. You're not talking about cleaning. You want to feel like we're a team." She froze with her mouth open and then started to cry. "Yes, I just want you to be with me, not against me." He went over and hugged her for the first time in all our sessions. This is the miracle of understanding. Underneath all the claims and demands was a simple need to be heard and accepted. The next week, they came back with smiles and told me how they had washed the dishes together and laughed at silly things. I couldn't hold back tears of joy. Moments like this remind me why I chose this profession. Story 60. I remember a shocking incident. My wife quietly admitted that she deliberately provoked her husband to scream and then complained to her friends about how terrible he was. I like the attention, she says without a shadow of shame. It turns out that only during scandals does he really pay attention to her. The rest of the time, he lives in his world of gadgets and work. A pathological solution to a real problem is when a person is ready for drama instead of ignoring it. The worst thing is that this model is passed on to children. They learn that love is expressed through conflict. Story 61. I open the door to my office and there is a woman with a black eye and a man explaining she fell down the stairs herself. After 15 minutes of conversation, it becomes clear that there was no ladder. There are cases when the relationship problem has a name and surname, and it is not the one who comes for help. When one partner systematically humiliates, beats, or manipulates, this is not an interaction effect, it is pure violence. The most painful thing is to watch the abuser convince the victim that she is provoking his behavior. Such couples are not referred to therapy, they are separated. Story 62. In the morning, I receive an email from a client. "Doctor, my husband and I have decided to divorce. Thank you for everything." My heart is clenching. Another setback. But I read on. For the first time in 20 years, we spoke calmly and respectfully. We realized that we loved not each other, but the idea of a family. Now we will be good parents to our children, but each separately. Smiling through tears is also a success, albeit a painful one. Some relationships cannot be saved, but they can be ended with dignity. They learned how to part like adults, not like offended children. Their sons will see that even the end can be civilized. This is also an important life lesson. Story 63. I am standing by the window, looking at the rain and thinking about yesterday's couple. 30 years of marriage, and they were sitting in my office like two enemies in negotiations. She is a famous artist. He is a civil engineer. What could have united them? But it turned out that it was the opposites that destroyed their lives. He lives by facts and figures, while she needs emotions and inspiration. When I paint, he counts how much paint I used, she said bitterly. And when I tell him about the project, he says, and keeps mixing colors. The strange thing is that when they were young, this difference attracted them. He admired her spontaneity and she admired his reliability. But the years turned admiration into irritation. His precision became a prison for her creativity for him, chaos. For 30 years, they never tried to understand the world through the eyes of their partner. He never asked her what she felt when she painted. She never wondered why it was important for him to plan everything in advance. Two different brains in one house, but never intersected. Story 64. A couple was fighting about the laundry. He was washing a shirt and said, "Look, I can do it myself." She looks and sees a pink shirt, it was white, a burnt hole from the iron, and a button sewn with red thread. "Is this your help?" He is proud. "But I did it myself." I had to explain the difference between doing and doing it right. Story 65. His wife is outraged. He thinks that washing dishes is a woman's job. The husband justifies himself. "I do it when there are no more plates." She. "That's not washing, that's emergency kitchen rescue." Him. "But it's effective. A lot accumulates at once." I explain. "It's like waiting until all your teeth fall out to go to the dentist once." Story 66. Wednesday, a session I will never forget. A couple comes to me. Both of them are deaf and dumb. We communicate through a sign language interpreter, and suddenly I realize they are quarreling just like all other couples. Only instead of shouting, they make sharp gestures, and instead of slamming the door, they demonstratively turn away from their partner. The problem is the same. He wants children. She is afraid that she will not be able to be a good mother because of her peculiarity. "How can I teach my child to speak if I can't hear?" she cries in sign language. And he is furious. "Do you think we are inferior?" I sit and watch their silent dialogue, and it strikes me. Emotions do not need sounds. Anger, pain, love, all this can be read in their movements, facial expressions, and eyes. We work with them for 3 months. She meets a family of deaf and dumb people who are raising wonderful children. She attends courses on how parents with disabilities can help their children adapt to the world. Finally, she finds the courage. Our child will be bilingual. He will know both gestures and sounds. A year later, she gets a call. Her daughter was born. They send me a photo of the girl smiling and making a hello gesture at the same time. Story 67. I receive a text message from a client. "Doctor, my wife found my second phone. Come quickly." I rush to the address he sent. The picture is terrible. Broken plates, overturned furniture. She is sitting on the floor with the phone in her hands and reading the message. 2 years, she shouts through her tears. 2 years you lied to me. The phone contains correspondence with his mistress, photos of their dates, even joint plans for the future. He stands with his head down. "I wanted to tell you." "When? After your mistress's wedding?" The most tragic thing is that she is not just a wife, she is 7 months pregnant. "How could you? We are expecting a child." And he, as always in such cases, tries to justify himself. "It didn't mean anything. You're the one in charge." But the phone says otherwise. It was not a passing passion, but a real relationship. He was living a double life, a caring father-to-be by day and a young man in love with another woman by night. His wife makes the most difficult decision. She goes to her mother and files for divorce. "I don't want my child to grow up in a lie," she says, heading for the door. She calls a month later. She has given birth to a son. She is alone but happy. Better honest loneliness than a fake family. Story 68. Monday morning begins with an emergency call. "Doctor, urgently, my husband says he's going to his mistress if I don't stop controlling him." An hour later, a couple sits in the office between whom you could cut the tension with a knife. She is a successful businesswoman who is used to controlling everything. He is a creative person who needs space for self-expression. "You can't even buy milk without my permission," he seethes. "And you can't even tell me where you're going to be," she retorts. Two completely different philosophies of life collided in one marriage. She sees his spontaneity as irresponsibility. He sees her planning as a prison. For months, I have been trying to teach them to compromise. She gives him freedom in the little things. He takes responsibility for the important things. Slowly, they learn to dance together without stepping on each other's toes. The most surprising thing is that at the end of therapy, she confessed, "I like his unpredictability. I was just afraid of losing control." And her organization saved me from chaos. I just didn't want to admit it. Sometimes people are not at war with their partners, but with their fears. Story 69. A man complains, "My wife is constantly rearranging things. I ask for details. I pick up the remote and it's not where I left it." Wife, "You threw it between the cushions of the couch." He, "That's where it's comfortable." She, "Convenient to look for an hour?" He is outraged. "I remember exactly where I put it." I said, "Memory is selective. You remember where you put it, but forget to put it back." Story 70. A colleague from another city calls. "I have a couple here. They are coming to you for a consultation. I warn you, it's a complicated case." The next day they arrive. Both are wheelchair users. They met at the rehabilitation center, got married, and dream of having children. But the doctors are categorically against it. The risk is too high for her, and it is not known what will happen to the child. "We want to try," she says with fire in her eyes. "Everyone around us says we are selfish, but don't we have the right to motherhood?" Her husband supports her. "We are ready for all the difficulties. We have love, patience, and financial means." But relatives are against it. Doctors are against it. Even friends refuse to support them. "They say the child will be unhappy with disabled parents," she cries. The most painful thing is that society often perceives people with disabilities as inferior parents. But I see two smart, responsible people who just want to start a family. "Your disability does not make you bad parents," I tell them. "On the contrary, you know the value of life better than most." We work to prepare them for all possible challenges, from physical difficulties to psychological pressure from others. A year later, we get a call. A healthy daughter was born. Doctors say she's developing well, and most importantly, she is happy. She sees that her parents love her. Sometimes the strongest parents are those who had to fight for the right to become them. Story 71. Last week, a man told me how he exchanges messages with escort girls during business trips, even sending them the hotel address and room number. "But we haven't met," he is indignant. "It's not cheating, it's just a correspondence." And his wife sits next to him with the face of a stone statue. This is a truly one-sided case, when one partner lives in their own reality, where black can be convincingly called white. Such situations in my practice are about 60 to 40%. But the saddest thing is when I see a couple where one has already morally left the relationship and the other is still hoping to fix everything. Story 72. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and a couple comes in with a strange energy. She talks incessantly. He looks at the floor. "You know he doesn't do anything around the house and I'm running around like a crazy person," the woman complains. The husband is silent. "Say something," she elbows him. "What is there to say? It will be wrong anyway," he grumbles. It's a classic pattern. One person fills the space with words, and the other gets defensive. She perceives his silence as disrespect. He perceives her chatter as an attack. Two lonely worlds under one roof. Story 73. Outside the door, a young couple is waiting, together for only a year, but they have already screamed at each other for life. He never listens to me, she complains. She's always demanding something. He is indignant. I start with a simple one. Tell me the last time you said something nice to each other. There is a deathly silence. They look at each other as if they were seeing each other for the first time. I don't remember, she admits. Neither do I, he says. This is it. When criticism becomes the only form of communication, love dies of malnutrition. Story 74. It's Thursday evening. The last rays of the sun are breaking through the blinds of my office. This is usually the quietest time of the day. All the couples have left, the notes are in the journal, and my thoughts are in order. But today is different. I'm sitting here thinking about this morning's couple, an unusual one that made me reconsider many things. He is a famous surgeon. She is an ordinary supermarket cashier. We met in the hospital when she was bringing her injured mother there. The difference in status is enormous, but that day in my office they sat as equals. The problem is not social status, but something much deeper. He can't trust me, she said. He's always checking my words, as if I were an uneducated fool. And he defended himself. I just want to protect her from making mistakes. I have more experience. But in her eyes, I saw not gratitude for his care, but pain from constant humiliation. It turned out that he corrects her every word in public, gives her advice on clothes, even orders food in a restaurant for her. You don't know anything about wine, he says. I'd rather choose. And she remains silent because she is used to thinking that he is the best. The most tragic thing is that he really loves her, but this love is poisoned by his own arrogance. He can't believe that a woman without a university degree can have her own tastes, thoughts, and desires. We worked for months to teach him to respect her intelligence and her to value her own opinion. The hardest part was to convince him that education does not equal intelligence and that a diploma does not give you the right to humiliate a person. When she finally said to him, I like this wine and I'll order it, he realized that he was not losing a cashier, but a woman he had fallen in love with for her strength and independence. Story 75. A young couple comes in, both psychologists by training. It would seem that they should know a lot about relationships, but professional knowledge does not save you from human weaknesses. She analyzes his every action through the prism of theories, and he treats her as a client, not a partner. You're manipulating, she accuses. And you're designing, he replies. The office turns into a battlefield of psychological terms. The funny thing is that all these professional labels hide banal images. She wants attention, he wants space. Education does not guarantee wisdom. Story 76. Excuse me, did you say that your husband earns $10,000 a month selling cocaine and you do not want him to quit? I asked the woman in the office again. She nodded as naturally as if she were talking about selling insurance policies. It was one of those cases when I could clearly see who the real problem was. But there are only 20% of such situations. In the rest of the cases, it's really an interaction effect. Two people who together turn into an emotional time bomb. Most often, there are two people in my office who just want to be heard. Story 77. The couple can't share the remote control. He. I'm the head of the family. I choose. She. What am I, a decoration? He. You can choose when I'm not here. Her. I mean never. Him. Well, almost. I said, democracy in the family is not about the strongest ruling, but about agreeing together. Otherwise, it's a dictatorship with elements of comedy. Story 78. A client calls. My husband says I'm controlling. I ask for examples. Well, I check to see if he's closed the door, turned off the iron, taken the keys. How many times does that happen? 5 or 6 times. In a day? For leaving the house? I don't say anything. Maybe I'm really a little, NASA does less checks before launching a rocket. Story 79. The most powerful illusion I face every day is the idea that people think I am a magician who can fix their partner. A man brings his wife and says, "Make her cook dinner for me again." The wife drags her husband and begs, "Explain to him that football is not more important than family." They both expect me to take their side and issue an ultimatum. In reality, my job is more like that of an interpreter between two people who speak different languages of emotions. When a couple is ready to listen to each other, a miracle happens. When they are not, even the best therapist is powerless against a wall of pride and resentment. Story 80. The client boasts, "I am very caring. I always tell my wife when she gets better." The wife is horrified. "That's not caring, that's cruel." He, "But it's true." She, "The truth can be tactful." He, "And how else? Silence?" I said, "There is a third option. Say something nice, for example, that she is always beautiful regardless of her weight." Story 81. A couple was arguing about the TV. He said, "Why do we always watch her TV shows?" She, "Because when you choose, you turn on soccer." He, "Football is a sport, it develops you." Her, "22 grown men chasing a ball is development?" Him, "What about your melodramas?" I said, "The compromise is simple. Watch the news. There's drama, sports, and reality." Story 82. The morning call interrupts my coffee. "Doctor, we had a fight yesterday because of your advice." It turns out that after the session, the man told his wife, "The therapist said you were a manipulator," although I was talking about the need for an honest dialogue. It's a classic situation. People hear what they want to hear and twist the words in their favor. Sometimes it seems to me that half of my clients come not for help, but for ammunition for their domestic wars. The therapist confirmed that I'm right becomes a new weapon in relationships. Story 83. The wife complains, "He thinks cleaning is about moving things from place to place." Husband, "I do clean." I ask how exactly. "I put everything in one pile." She, "That's not cleaning, that's concentrating chaos." He, "But it's fast." I said, "It's like treating a headache. Take a hammer and hit your leg. The pain is moved, but it hasn't gone away." Story 84. The wife complains, "He thinks that helping with the kids means babysitting while I'm at the store." Husband, "What's wrong with that?" She, "They are your children too." Him, "Well, yes, but you are better with them." I said, "You don't help with your own children. You are their father. It's like saying, I help you live in your own house." Story 85. The phone rings at 5 in the morning. There is never good news at that time. "Doctor, my daughter tried to kill herself." The woman sobs into the phone. I recognize the voice. It's the mother of the girl I saw a month ago with her boyfriend. Back then, it seemed like they were having normal teenage problems. I rush to the hospital. The girl is lying pale with bandages on her arms. The same boyfriend is sitting next to her, but now he looks not like a romantic hero, but like a frightened child. "She wrote that she can't go on," he wheezes. Gradually, the truth emerges. What the parents thought was great love turned out to be a toxic relationship. He didn't physically beat her, but he humiliated her with words every day, isolated her from her friends, and convinced her that no one else needed her. And then, when she tried to resist, he would hug her and swear his love. A classic cycle of psychological abuse. The girl lost her bearings between love and pain. "If he doesn't love me, then why live?" she whispers from her bed. The worst thing is that her parents saw the bruises on her soul but considered them character traits. We work for months to restore her understanding of her own value. The boyfriend disappears from her life as soon as he realizes that he can no longer control her. 6 months later, she smiles. It turns out that love doesn't have to hurt every day. Story 86. I open the door and a woman with a black eye comes in. "She fell off her bike," her husband explains with a smile. But in her eyes, I read a real story. After 30 minutes of gentle questioning, she finally confesses, "He hits when he drinks, and he drinks every day." He is outraged. She's exaggerating. He pushed me once, and it was an accident. For him, it was an accident. For her, it is a daily nightmare. I explained to him in simple words, there is no accidental violence, there is only the beginning of a long downward slide. But he doesn't hear me. He has an excuse for the next time in his head.